Hello, my name is Jordan Call, and these are my special education interviews for Module 3. So the first question was on child find procedures, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but I did not know what child find procedures meant when I first read it. So I researched it and realized I do know what they are, I just didn't know that they were called child find procedures. So basically what this is the process of identifying a student who might be eligible for special education services and IEPs and things like that. So when I interviewed my administrator, she said that students are first observed in the classroom by their general education teacher and maybe any other people that are in and out of the room, like paras. Just observing those different behaviors and learning styles. And then the student concerns are discussed at our TLT meetings. And our TLT meetings happen once a week, and those meetings are centered around data discussions and maybe student needs, concerns, and things like that. So that's where the students that we have concerns about are first brought up. And then the student begins the SIT process to see if they're eligible for an IEP. So, once those concerns seem strong enough that, hey, maybe we need to look at them a little closer, that's when they enter that SIT process. And then the general education teacher works to meet the SIT plan goals with the student. So the SIT meetings happen once per quarter for students, and goals are given for that period of time, and it's the general education teacher's responsibility to help that child meet the goals for the SIT plan. And if those goals are met, then new goals are given at the next meeting. And so that's how that kind of works. The special education teacher said that it starts with the SIT process, and the special education teacher that I interviewed is actually the SPED teacher for grades 2 and 3. So she said most kindergarten and first grade students do not get tested for SPED services because they want to make sure that it's not from lack of exposure. So, being in the district that we're in, we have a lot of varying family styles. So we might have students who come into kindergarten knowing a ton of information, their alphabet, counting, maybe even simple adding, things like that. And then we also have students who come in who barely can say their name. So we want to make sure we're not just throwing IEPs at students just because maybe they don't know how to count to 10 as quick as another student. We want to make sure that they have exposure to things and they're getting some education before we take those steps. So we are really cautious in kindergarten and first grade, and that's something I didn't quite know too much about before these interviews. And then the special education paraprofessional, when I mentioned child find procedures, she actually was just as confused about of those terms as I was. But I told her, that's how students are identified for SPED services, and then she said all she knew was that it was SIT process first before those IEPs. This makes me think, I actually started in the district as a paraprofessional, and although I wasn't a SPED para, I was a title para. I do feel like our paras need to be educated better on policies and, the way our school runs, and they need to be treated as the professional that they are. They're very vital in our system, and I definitely think that they need to be made more aware of things. And especially if you're a SPED para, you should know what qualifies a student for SPED services and how they got there in the first place. So I definitely thinking, in the future when I'm an administrator, I definitely want to make sure that those paras are involved and understand the importance of their role and how important they are to me. The second question is, what do you find to be the most challenging part of your role with regards to special education, and why? So my administrator said parents are definitely the most challenging part. Parents are passionate about their children, and that's human nature. So when parents might feel that their students aren't, making the gains that maybe they need to, or maybe they feel that their students not getting what they need, or maybe they're not being challenged enough, they can get kind of upset and frantic. And she said sometimes you have to deal with that right on the spot. So just being able to communicate with parents and keep them calm and making them feel understood can sometimes be a challenge. The second thing she mentioned was laws and policies regarding special education, and I'm very glad that she brought that up because after doing Module 2, I quickly realized that I myself need to be more aware of the laws and policies regarding special education because that's an area that I do not have a lot of experience in, and I definitely do not have a ton of knowledge in. So hearing that she feels the same way about laws and policies just makes me realize how vital it is to educate myself in that area before stepping into a role as administrator. She also said supporting general ed teachers can be challenging. Sometimes you have those teachers who feel like they can't teach special education students. They're difficult, or I've got to keep going. I can't go that slow, or I don't have time to sit with, next to them and work with them one-on-one. So I think just being that positive role model and that leader and setting, an example that yes, you can. All students are different. They all have diverse needs, and just making that teacher feel supported and that they can do their job, they can meet that student's needs, and that they will, and just being there for them. And then finding quality SPED teachers. I know this is especially hard in our district. We seem to lose SPED teachers frequently because we have a challenging population, and a lot of our SPED students come along with behavior problems, and sometimes people don't know how to deal with that, and it's especially challenging. So just finding good quality SPED teachers that know their job, know what they're doing, and are confident in what they're doing, and keeping those quality teachers is a challenge. The special education teacher said that scheduling is her biggest challenge. She's in charge of not only her schedule, but also the para schedules. So, making sure that every student meets their minutes and, working around teacher schedules, it can be kind of a headache. And she said they frequently have to work on it and change things and just to make sure everything's running smoothly. And then time. Special education students are required so many minutes based on their IEP, and there's sometimes a good handful of special education students. So making sure that they each get the minutes that they need, and fitting that all into your schedule and para schedules and all of that. Also meeting diverse and individual needs. You might be working with a small group, but that doesn't mean that all their needs are the same. So making sure that student A gets what they need, student B gets what they need, and student C gets what they need. Just working through all of that to make sure that we're helping each individual student be successful. And then behavior students. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of our special education students also have behavior issues. So she mentioned that it's hard to pull them in a small group and have it function the way it should. But, she could take a behavior student one-on-one, but then you're losing that time that you could have with a small group. So just weighing those different options and knowing how to handle those behavior students and work best with them and still provide them the quality education that they deserve as well. And the special education para, she said that communicating the assignment in a way that students understand can be difficult. And I can definitely relate to that because, I'm really good at math. And when a student struggles with a math concept, sometimes it's hard for me to word it in a way that makes sense to them because it comes so easy to me. So I have to take a step back and I have to listen to the student and I have to ask, what's not making sense? What part are we getting stuck on? And then go from there. So I can definitely relate to that. And then also working slowly, when something comes easy to you and when you know how to do something, you just want to go. Well, students that don't have those skills yet or don't understand typically work much slower. And so just having the patience to go at their rate can be a challenge. The next question, what is the most rewarding part of your job when dealing with special education students, parents, and other teachers, and why? So my administrator said that the most rewarding part was watching students succeed and grow. Students can be kind of down when they're not getting the gains that they would like to see, or maybe they see their peers getting done quicker or understanding things easier, and they can get kind of down. So watching them actually succeed and grow is a huge success. And then parent gratitude. She said that parents will frequently call or email her and just say, thank you for helping the teachers meet the needs of my student. I see so much growth in them, and just how much the parents truly appreciate all that you do. The special education teacher said the student progress again was high up in there for the rewarding part. That's why they do their job. And then also parent relationships, getting to know those parents and making sure that they feel heard and understood, and making sure that they know that their child is taken care of. And then the special education para said the strong student relationships, they typically work with the same students every day. So they create quite the bond, and just getting to be with them throughout the school year and seeing the change in them. And then she also said when the students have their light bulb moment of a certain concept and they finally understand something or they meet a goal is a huge reward. And I like the way she put that, the light bulb moment. Some students are able to understand a concept right as you teach it. But a lot of the time students with special needs don't quite get that light bulb moment right away. So when you're actually present and helping them and working with them, and maybe you've been working for a week and then they finally get it, it's just so rewarding, not only for them but also for you, since you've been working so hard and so closely with them. The next question, what advice do you have on supervision of special educational staff, including para, speech path, etc.? So my administrator said make sure that they're highly qualified for the position and they have years of experience, preferably. And she told me, I've been in the district 3 years and we have gone through 3 emotional behavioral SPED teacher rooms. So we have a room that is specifically designed for students who have emotional behavioral problems. And we are on our 3rd teacher for that room. I think a lot of the times when people accept the job for that room, they don't quite know what it entails and what they're in for and what's going to happen, and maybe they're not quite as prepared as they thought they were. So she said just making sure that when you interview people for those types of positions that you really tell them what that position entails and what a real day is like in that room, so that way you get the best possible person in there, because having to replace someone every single year is hard, not only as a staff and as a principal, but also for the students in that room, having to adjust to a new person every year when they might have just started getting used to one another, just built that relationship. That change can be hard on them. She also said providing adequate professional development is huge, making sure that we're up to date with laws, regulations, policies, practices, and providing that professional development time for those teachers. And then to stress the importance of their job. The SPED teachers, they are experts at their position, and so just making them know that they are important and that you need their help because, like my principal mentioned earlier in the interview, she's not as familiar with laws and policies as she'd like to be, and the SPED teachers are. So just stressing the importance and going to them as needed. And then the SPED teacher is in charge of SPED paras. The principal can't possibly schedule everything, especially when it comes to special education. The principal is not necessarily going to know how many minutes each individual SPED student needs, or, the schedules of the teachers at every point in the day. So making sure that the SPED teachers are in charge of their paras and where they need to be and how many minutes and all that. So that way that's kind of a load taken off of you as principal. And then communication, just communicating as a team and working as a team, and making sure everyone's informed of what's going on. The special education teacher said, don't be afraid to tell someone when something needs to be done. So, if you have those questions as a general ed teacher, not being afraid to ask those questions and get clarification on what needs to be done and how best to help that student. Also, giving reminders, where they should be, who they're helping, what they should be doing, communication and asking questions also. The special education para said, it's important for them to have specific jobs or tasks while they're in the room with the student. Sometimes they come into a room and teachers might not have a specific task for them to do with that student, and the paras don't know specifically what the classroom's working on or how best to help that student or what tasks that student needs to master. So just having clear, tasks for them to work on with that student is highly important. And they also said communication. So that's something that was common between the 3 of those interviews, was they all said communication. which is key in any workplace. Just keeping everyone informed, everyone talking, and everyone just communicating effectively to meet the needs of those students. The next question was, how do you work effectively with parents of special needs children? My administrator said listening is huge. Listening to their concerns, listening to their needs, listening to their hopes. They know their child best, and it's important to listen to what they see at home and what they wish for in the school year, and what they need from us to help their student, and just making them feel understood. And then communication with them, keeping the process open and honest, and keeping them informed of all the steps, and having them involved in the meetings, and just keeping them present with the whole experience. Building the relationships, obviously, and then facilitating SIT and IEP meetings. So not just letting the SPED teachers take charge of those meetings, but also being there as well to communicate with the parents and stay informed so that they see that you are there for their child. The special education teacher said communication also, keeping them informed of any little thing that happens, any change, maybe things that they could do at home to work with their student to help them reach their needs. Strong relationships again, making sure that they understand the processes for SIT. They need to know what the SIT process is, what their students, what that process looks like for their child, and what it means to be in the SIT process, and that it's not truly time for special ed services, but that they are being monitored and looked at to make sure that they get what they need. And then making sure that they understand IEP information. IEPs are often written in educational language, so parents sometimes don't quite understand what the IEP truly means, and so making sure that you explain it thoroughly to them so that they know what their child's receiving at school, and that they're fully informed and understand what that document says. And then getting them involved in their child's education. Not just simply telling them what's going on, but getting them in the building, in the meetings, even on the phone, and just keeping them informed with what's going on with their child's education and how they can help. And the special education para said working with parents is not something that they currently do. They don't typically see the parents all that much, so she didn't have much to comment on this question. The next question, how do you work with regular ed teachers with students with special needs? The administrator said providing support and resources as needed, and then taking students for breaks. That's a huge one that she does for us. Sometimes SPED students just need a break from the room. They need a break from the task. They just need to leave the room and maybe walk around the building, or just talk to another adult and kind of just relieve the stress and let their brains rest for a little bit. And our principal is huge on coming to our room and taking those students for those breaks and just developing those relationships with them during that time. And then she also helps with rewards and incentives. Sometimes special education students need that extra boost to help them get things done. And so like a sticker chart or a daily task chart can help some of those students. And she helps us develop those. The special education teacher said accommodating their needs as best as possible. Like I mentioned earlier, each classroom has, a different schedule from the next. So being able to accommodate for their schedule needs as best as possible is something that's vital to the success of everyone in the building. And then trying to be visible in the classrooms as much as possible. So not simply just pulling the students out for small group instruction or one-on-one instruction, but actually coming into the room and possibly co-teaching and really getting a feel for what's going on in their own individual classroom. So that way, when they do work with a student with special needs, they're able to relay the information in a way that's best for them. And then the special education para said, going over this SPED student needs, so specifically what are they needing right now to succeed. Sometimes the para is only in there for a set amount of time, and they work with so many kids during the day that it's easy to forget who needs what. So just being clear with them and communicate with them about those needs for that individual student. And then also asking the teacher what the students need help with. So not being afraid to have those open lines of communication. What advice do you have for a first-year administrator? So my administrator said, be visible. So don't just be, in your office and working on things and then Try to act like you know what's going on when you're in a meeting. Actually be visible in the classrooms. Take time to go into the classrooms and learn about those children, not just the special needs, but the students as a whole, and make them see that they are important to you and whatnot. And then asking for help when needed. So you're not going to know everything about what's going on. So just asking for help and not being afraid to ask questions when you need to. She also said being transparent and listening. Also being familiar with the laws. She actually said that since she was not as familiar with laws and policies that she would have liked to have been, she actually got herself into a little bit of trouble a few times when dealing with some SPED students and decisions. So she said that all could have been avoided had she been more aware of the laws and policies. So definitely making yourself more aware before you're in that administrator role. And then being familiar with the district policies, so understanding our process for identifying students and then providing those minutes and those needs, and just being familiar with how to handle our district policies in general, and then staying organized. Obviously, as first year administrator, she said there's a lot of things that you're juggling, and so finding a way to stay organized with all of it is definitely going to help keep your sanity, she said. The special education teacher said, learn about special education students. So taking the time to really get to know them and dig into their brain and figure out how their mind works, how they best learn, and just letting them know that you're there for them and that they can ask you questions, and just really showing them that you care about them as an individual and that you're willing to do what it takes to help them learn, and then helping and assisting as needed. The special education para said include the paras. A lot of the times they feel left out. They don't go to staff meetings. They don't go to many meetings in general. So a lot of the times they feel left out of the information, and they wish they were made more aware of some of the things, so that way they can do their job better. And then just communication in general. Sometimes they find out through the grapevine about something, and they would much rather just find out altogether through like a meeting. And then she also suggested maybe like weekly meetings with SPED teachers and paras, so that way everybody's kind of on the same page, which I thought was a great idea. The next question, how do you describe the role of the special education teacher and the building principal? My administrator said the special education teacher should develop strong relationships with their students and the gen ed teacher. That's obviously a given. Those relationships are definitely needed. The special education teacher should develop and follow the student IEPs. That's kind of a main point of their job. They have to develop those plans and figure out what steps that student needs to take in order to reach their goals and succeed. The special education teacher should be in charge of SPED paras and their schedules, and that the principal needs to assist as needed and attend meetings. So just because the principal may not be an expert in SPED services doesn't mean that they don't need to be visible in every meeting and educate themselves in those meetings and get to know the families and the students that we're servicing. The special education teacher said that the special ed teacher should be in charge of writing the IEP and setting up the meetings. So that way it's in a more organized fashion. Plus, typically they're the ones that have the strong relationship with the families and are usually in constant contact with them. The principal should be at every SIT and IEP meeting. They need to be included, and it's also important for the parents to see that the principal is there in attendance and that they can ask questions as needed. And the principal should attempt to learn about each SPED student. So, when they do their walkthroughs and come into our rooms, they should really get to know each student, not just SPED students, but each student in general, and talk with them and make them feel important. And the special education para said the principal should be involved with the SPED process. So not behind closed doors, but should definitely be involved. The SPED teacher should communicate with paras, and the SPED teacher should make sure student minutes are being met. So I think that they all had some really good things to say for this question. It definitely seemed that like this question had a lot deeper answers, and a lot of deeper discussions came from this question. I think that our school has had some difficulties when it comes to SPED students and laws and policies, and sometimes things were not going as they should. So I think a huge piece is just that communication and making sure that we're all educated in the processes and that we're following laws and regulations and policies as they're outlined. And the final question, what characteristics do you seek in aspiring administrators with regards to special education? So my administrator said, someone someone being supportive, knowledgeable of the laws, flexible, and organized. The special education teacher said being supportive, understanding different student needs and schedules of a SPED teacher. And then special education para said the ability to communicate and be supportive. So something that they all had in common was being supportive. Sometimes it's easy for an administrator to think that they have the answers when maybe they don't. So just being supportive and understanding of decisions that are made and asking questions along the way and just educating themselves in the process so that they too can become an expert one day on special ed services. So when I think about these interviews as a whole, it makes me realize that when I become an administrator, I want to be more knowledgeable in the laws and policies and regulations so that I don't run into any hurdles when I'm administrator. I actually last year had a student who was an emotional behavioral student who came from another district and from the most inclusive room that he could possibly be in. And then jumped right into mainstream classroom, and it was a huge deal, and it's not the way things should have gone, and there was a lot of negative things that came from it. And so if we all would have been simply better educated in these areas, that all could have been avoided, and it would have been better for the student. So I think just getting experience in special education and educating myself in it is going to be a huge piece for becoming an administrator. This is an area that I definitely do not feel ready to be an administrator yet. So hopefully throughout this course I will, gain more knowledge, and then I plan on doing more things outside of my courses just to gain experience. Working more with my SPED teacher in the building and really getting to know my SPED students in my classroom this year and the processes that are taken to help them. So I definitely want to make sure that I hire quality people in the future and make them feel important, make them feel heard, and making sure that parents feel heard and understood, and just being able to communicate effectively in general. So I really had a good time interviewing these 3 people and definitely learned a lot from them. And hopefully the advice that they had to share and the stories and all the things they had to share come in handy in the future when I am an administrator one day. So thanks for listening.